Hey y'all, this your Geechee girl and Empress Stephanie. I didn't come here to F up your day, but I came to speak the truth and shame the devil. So if you have a problem with that, then this may not be the channel for you. But if you dare to stay around, what you will hear should really burn your ears and touch your mind, body, and soul. And I want to take the time to welcome you to my channel. Call them out. We're going to speak the truth so that we can demand equal protection and justice by those who are supposed to protect us. And instead of protect us, they actually harm us by using their powers and authority. So, um, I'll apologize first of all for having to glance down from time to time because I will be looking at some notes that I have. So excuse me for that, and just some other business that I want to get out of the way before I really get into it is a disclaimer that the views, the opinions, um, interviews, information that's shared, anything that's talked or about on this channel is solely my views and opinions and things that can be backed up factually with law, policy, procedure, regulation, and or actual evidence, actual witness stories and statements and information from those who have the right to share their stories. Um, so I just want to go ahead and get that out of the way. Oh, you're going to see and hear things that others may not dare to ever say because they're worried about personal and professional um, repercussions. But I do this um, for several reasons. I do it for justice and equality and for humanity and to protect the lives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color from discrimination, racism, torture, abuse, neglect, um, every form of every crime. We could go down the list and name it. We'd be here forever. Um, but I also am doing this so that it doesn't happen to other people. The reason anything that is demonic and bad and evil and not good is allowed to continue and go on is because people don't say anything about it. And if we continue to be silent and not talk about all of the instances and examples of the abuse and violations of our civil and constitutional rights as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, if we don't talk about how it happens and the details of it, we will continue to be tricked, bamboozled, duped, played, getting over on, taken advantage of, lied to, manipulated, and ultimately losing our lives, the lives of our loved ones, our family members, either directly through death or through lifelong incarceration or incarceration in and out of the criminal justice system. That then not just affects um, the person and the individual that's charged for the crime, what happens to them then is perpetuated on the family members and the friends and the loved ones who dare to stay committed and not break ties and bonds because your family member or loved one has been convicted of charged with a crime in the criminal justice system. And so being silent is not an option, and it's not effective, because if we continue to be silent, we already know what the numbers are of mass incarceration. We will silently walk ourselves into genocide. And if you do your own research and you look at, United Nations, you look at the Jews, you look at Martin Luther King and them going to the United Nations trying to sue the criminal justice system, of the United States. There's nothing new under the sun, and the same tricks and tactics have been being used from the beginning of time, and they're just advanced and enhanced with time. So through legislation, laws, regulation, policy, procedure, um, internal language, it's changed so that they still get what they want without making it appear to be something illegal or something discriminatory or something that is just being created and made to discriminate against Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the criminal justice system. So I don't want to have idle talk because there's a lot for us to talk about. But I wanted to have this introduction today before we really go into real stories and real cases that will talk about real officers of the state, lawyers, attorneys, judges, law clerks, police officers, politicians, anybody and everybody who is considered a public servant in any capacity at all. I don't care if it's the laboratory technician who's looking at DNA samples, any and everybody who is a public servant, who is involved in any way, shape, or form in handling any part of a person's discovery information regarding a criminal justice case. And so, in order to truly bust the system wide open and expose it for truly what it is, we have to include everybody and anybody that is involved in the process, so that we finally kill this demon and this beast of racism and white supremacy and discrimination in the criminal justice system that continue to cripple us in every aspect of our lives and communities of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it is indeed a generational curse that we are going to have to be the ones that kill it once and for all. Um, I am in the South, if you can see, and um, these trees, these oak trees, even that I'm sitting under, is a great reminder of times not too long ago where my ancestors, your ancestors, our great grandparents were lynched and hung, beaten, maimed, brutalized, raped, and ultimately killed and lynched on these tree branches that, if they could talk, would weep tears of blood and tell the stories that we are being told to forget about. But because it is in our cellular DNA, the trauma, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, and the trauma that we as a nation of people of color have endured and had to go through from the beginning of time of our contact, should I say, with Europeans and whites. And so this is the generational curse in the story that has to end, because I don't want to pass this on to my heirs and to the next generation, that as a Black, Indigenous, and person of color in the United States of America, we are not at peace, we are not at rest, we are not being treated equally, and it is not so-called fair for the land of the free and the home of the brave, and a land of equality and justice for all, for our hearts to have to beat fast and to drop into our stomach if we are approached by a police officer who is white in America. The fact that we have to talk to our children, grandchildren, family members, loved ones, anybody that has an air about what you say and what you do if you're approached by a white police officer. Even conversations that we have to have in regards to um, behavior, the way you look, the way you dress, how you do your hair, everything has been whitewashed so that we have been subconsciously programmed and reprogrammed to feel and believe that white is right, and and white is the status, and because white is the standard, um, then black, indigenous, and people of color are never truly able to be themselves. And part of being truly who we are and honoring our ancestors and the life loss and the stuff that still continues to go on to us, that's not gone away, even though we're making six figures now, even though we're educated, even though we've been the president of the United States of America. At the end of the day, you're still a nigger when it boils down to it. If you go in the criminal justice system and you seek justice, you won't get the justice that you're looking for. And so, um, again, there is just a lot that we have to talk about. Prison reform, actually. We're going to talk about questions that we should be asking. We're going to, have episodes about questions we should have the answers to by now, and that the system knows the answers to. Talk about rather it's neglect, it's incompetence, or rather is just willfully withholding the information um, from black, indigenous, and people of color, and in the communities once you enter into contact with the criminal justice system. It should not be a system of don't ask, don't tell, and if you don't know the answer, we'll let you figure it out. Even though you're paying us to defend you and be your and be your lawyer, and I'm the judge, and I'm this person, and I'm that person, and I'm on this board, and I'm on the state bar, and I'm this and that, and all of the, excuse my expression, the fuckery and the bullshit about where you came from and what you have, and how much degrees in education that you tout and you dote on when you are bragging and talking about yourself. But in actuality, you're liars and you're cowards if you use those credentials that you claim that you have and you tout on and you dote on yourself about and you talk about and you put in your biographies. If you're that smart and if you studied like you say you did and you know the U.S. Constitution and you are in the capacity that we the people have put you in order to represent us, that means you need to be the best one at your game. That means you need to know the answers to legal issues and problems and situations and scenarios that come up where people have to be charged for something in the criminal justice system. And that means rather your defense or rather your prosecution for the state, or you're the judge, or you're the arresting police officer, whatever the capacity is that you have, your training, your education, and your ability to practice in the public means that you have a responsibility. And your responsibility is not to take advantage of the least of them so that you can have personal and professional gain, rather that be bonuses, rather that be promotions, rather that be looking out for your peers and lying for them and witness statements and evidence and turning the other eye in court, judges not stopping cases that are clearly coerced, not stopping, court cases where, the defendants are young, or they seem unsure, uncertain, just all of the things that go on that you're supposed to know better about. And yet you sit and you tell society, civilians, you tell all of the citizens of the United States of America, you tell them that we're required to follow the law. And these are the statutes and the regulations of the law. And I have to laugh because it's a joke. It is a joke because it is pure fuckery. The laws that you govern us by are not the same laws over and over and over and over and over and over again that are violated. So when our due process violated, our civil rights are violated, actors of the state, attorneys, prosecutors are involved in perjury on the court. They're involved in fraud. They're involved in conspiracy. They're involved in witness tampering, evidence tampering. They're involved in falsification of documents. I mean, you name it, they're involved in it. However, they get to make laws and decisions on the books that cover themselves, that say, you can't sue them. Yeah, by the way, we have immunity. And so what does that do? That tells you that you have no checks and balances, and you are giving somebody ultimate power and authority in a legal capacity to violate human rights and civil rights of a particular set of people, which are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and society at large. Of course, there's some white folks that go to prison, but it's just that the numbers aren't like those of Black and Indigenous and people of color in the correction system. And if anybody wants to challenge that, then they can go and look and research for themselves and look at the numbers and the amount of folks of color in the criminal justice system versus those that are white of European descent. So, like I said, we have a lot to talk about, and I'm not sure how many episodes um, I will be able to spit out, probably more than I can handle. But I'm doing this as um, a public announcement because, you know, like all of us who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we have someone or know somebody that's in the criminal justice system, and thus it affects us personally. And even though it's not me specifically, in the sense that I am a part of the system or in the system, I don't trust the system. I don't believe the system. I don't believe in the system. I don't have faith and hope in the system. And I'm speaking for myself, but I'm just like plenty other Black, Indigenous, and people of color that I talk to and am around on a regular basis, and that's just the sentiment that we know what's going to happen before it happens, because the system is not made for us and by us, is made only to oppress us, and it's made by our oppressors and for our oppressors to protect them, but to oppress us. And so, um, you know, there's going to be a lot to talk about. Some people are not going to be happy, but um, I will also include a most wanted list, which is going to be a collection of those that we should be on the lookout for, who have um, been named and complaints have been made about regarding their professional behavior or lack thereof, or their criminal actions while dealing with the public, while yet serving the public and getting paid by our tax dollars. Also, if we discuss anything relating to an active or current previous case, and we start talking about cases specifically, if we have any information, um, direct evidence that we can share, then we will share. Otherwise, basically things that would be public knowledge, and that reporters, law students, um, you know, public citizens, anyone want to be able to request the information. If you're able to get it through the courthouse yourself by requesting that, then that's the type of information that will be shared that you would otherwise have access to, and it wouldn't be private. It wouldn't be private anyway, but just to be able to give you the proof and confirmation and the resources that you need in order to fact check, because I'm not about the fake news. This is not fake news. This is real life. This is real shit. And this is stuff that is not a joke, is not a game. And basically, if you're not a Black, Indigenous, and person of color, um, then you can't relate. And if you are a white person who says that you're not racist and you don't support criminal and illegal activity by people of the court, and you're a good lawyer and you're a good judge and you follow the law, and you say that you're a good actor of the court and that you love black, indigenous, and people of color. Well, if you do, we sure can't tell, because by now we should have had a coalition of all of you black, indigenous, and people of color loving white folks that so-called are not racist and don't discriminate, and you want to help us and you want equal rights and justice for all. And so the way that you are culpable or guilty is in your lack of inaction. And your lack of inaction, I'll explain specifically, is by sitting there, and it's like you're the person who's on the ground tying the noose and then giving it to somebody to hang us while you're saying you didn't have any involvement because you stood there and watched the lynching and you actually participated in it by being silent and not opposing or objecting or stopping it and saying that something is wrong with it. So instead, your silence means that you're consenting because you're going along with it, because you're not going to stick your neck out, you're not going to risk your money, you're not going to risk your career, you're not going to risk your chance for a promotion and advancement, and that's really not your problem, all that nigga shit. So in reality, because you're not a black, indigenous, and person of color, that's why you can't relate. And right now, if in this day and age, 2022, we need to know if you're friend or foe. We need to know if you're for us or against us. It is not, and it should not any longer be, and we should not tolerate as a nation and a people of color. We should not tolerate joining tables that are not made for us and by us, and allowing people of other races to our table that aren't able to publicly and openly stand for us and with us and by us, and not just in the dark and behind closed doors and in silent, but come out and open your mouth and make it obvious and make it plain and make statements by doing actual things that you have to do something about, not this crap that we protest and you go and you say a speech and you talk, and the news, reporters get on and they talk about it, and you talk to Black Lives Matter and the typical Al Sharptons and folks or anybody that you think could represent um, the black community, a pastor, a black news anchor. All of a sudden, when someone gets shot or killed or beat by the police, when something happens, then you go and get those people. But it is all an illusion. It's an illusion, because we are being smiled to yet lied to in our faces at the same time. And you're talking about all this reform. If you're as smart as you say you are, and you're a first world country, and we are the United States of America, we got to be some dumb motherfuckers, and excuse my expression, that we haven't figured it out by now, and we have not made long-lasting, permanent corrections to things that we have shown and proven millions and millions of times by the people who go in and out and who are affected by racism, white supremacy, and all of the things that are harming us and are detrimental to our survival as a people, that continue to be inflicted upon us by the United States of America's criminal justice system and the actors who violate the law knowingly and willingly and consciously, all in behalf, all in the name of what, equality and justice. That's not true. And so, an example, we talk about equity, and let's choose the cannabis revolution. And so it's a joke that the number of people that are incarcerated had to spend this many years in prison after cannabis became legal. After cannabis became legal in the first state in the United States of America, equity would have been, there should have been no one else remaining and residing in the custody of the penal in the criminal justice system and the correction system in the United States of America when it became legal in the first state. That's what equity would have been: immediate pardoning, immediate amending of laws that decriminalize it and make it not legal to go to jail or to prison and to get sentenced for that, and then overturning all of the convictions that had anything to do with with um with cannabis and with marijuana. um and so if they had other crimes related to that, then deal with those crimes separately. But even if they were, say it was a felony murder and it had something to do with cannabis, and you got a charge on you for drugs, but you still have a murder charge, you still got a robbery charge, still that is an the impactful thing to take that charge off, because then now you reduce the time that they have to serve for something that used to be illegal that has now become legal. So it's just like prohibition of alcohol back in the days. And so when the times change, it should not just benefit um, white people, it should benefit everybody. And it should mostly benefit the people who have suffered at the hands of the system knowingly and willfully over and over and over again in all knowledge and understanding. Because you can't say you're incompetent, and you can't claim ignorance, and you can't claim that you don't know, because technically you hold us to higher standards, and we're just citizens. We're not lawyers and doctors and folks like that generally. And so you expect the common citizen to come to the table with all knowing knowledge and what your rights are and how to know this and how to know that. um, and so we should be able to hold you accountable in the same in the same way. And so holding you accountable in equity, and back to what I was talking about, cannabis would have been as well creating the pathways, direct pathways, not stuff where you can pretend that you're you put a hotline up, or you put a tab up on a website that says, contact us, and no one ever gets back to you, or we have funding, or we have grants, but when you apply, there's no money really available. It is just a bunch of runaround. It's not really direct, plain and simple equity programs in cannabis, that if you came out and you were incarcerated on a cannabis charge because you were growing or you were distributing or whatever it was, that means that you had some kind of business sense and wisdom and knowledge. You had some kind of business sense and wisdom and knowledge and understanding to be able to operate it. But because at the time it was deemed illegal, you ended up being criminalized for it rather than rewarded for your success and scaling of your business in the corporate world. And so when white made cannabis right, and the money and the regulations and all of that was there to support them making profit in it and scaling businesses, I think it's only fair that black, indigenous, and people of color who have been criminalized and suffered from it when it wasn't popular and when it wasn't legal and when they took risk that they weren't rewarded for but they were criminalized for, I think they should join the ranks. And if they join the ranks, then they would be the experts in the field. And they would be able to pass on generational wealth. They would have dispensaries. They would have the capability, the finances to be able to scale their business and put all of their wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that they have learned and acquired. And instead of being criminalized, they would be rewarded and be accepted in the corporate world, and even be able to, you know, list themselves on Wall Street and trade and all those kind of things, and have the success that whites have been able to have, but haven't suffered, haven't shed any tears, haven't lost anything, haven't been incarcerated, haven't been raided, hadn't had to deal with the stigma, the racial profiling, you know. eh, that if you're a cannabis smoker, or you sell it, you use it, you're a low person of society, and all of the stereotypes that come with it. And now that it's been legalized, it has been normalized for Europeans and whites to be able to still have access and um, gain financially, basically, personally and professionally, and pass on generational wealth because they've been able to come in and have the financing and the backing and the capabilities of coming into something and making money, and those who have suffered have no representation in the legal industry compared to that of our white counterparts. So, um, make sure I didn't miss anything because I talked about a lot, but this was truly just an introduction to the channel, an introduction to some of the things I'll be talking about, introduction to some of the issues that we'll be going over. Um, so I wanted to just give a broad, introduction today to really just, like I said, talk about some of the things that I'm sure you want to know the answers to. You hope somebody was talking about. You wish somebody was brave enough to say things that only Black and Indigenous and people of color would usually only say behind closed doors and not in public for fear of retaliation in their personal and professional lives. And so um, it's just not about being fake anymore. And how can we say we're okay as a people if we're hurting in our communities, we're hurting in our homes, we're hurting emotionally, physically, spiritually, we're hurting in every aspect because we're still being treated like slaves and second-class citizen, and most of the areas that should matter, especially dealing with your freedom and your safety and your security. And so no matter how well we do, no matter how much we accomplished American dream, we could be military, you could be a veteran, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a police officer, you could be a senator, you could be governor, you could be Barack Obama, you could be the president of the United States. And big up to him for being a person of color and holding that seat. I can only imagine um, what the weight of that crown was on your head, and uh, the monkeys on your on your back, and the burdens on your shoulders that you had to carry that you could never talk about. And as well, much respect and big up to First Lady Michelle, who operated in class and grace and style, and made you know Black, Indigenous, and people of color, all the girls and women, have something great to look at. We should have dolls made in your image, and that of other images of beautiful Black and brown women and girls, because you are a beautiful sight to behold. Um, so don't get me talking about Maya Angelou and phenomenal woman um, that you are. So, but I digress. Um, I was talking about basically you can sit in your homes, in your car, on your radio, on your work desktop, your office, whatever. However this comes to you. If you're one of those people that feel like you've arrived and you've accomplished the American dream, and race matters don't bother you as a Black, Indigenous, and person of color, then I pray and hope that you never have to be involved in the criminal justice system, and that your status and your title um, is with you and it means something when that time comes. Because how many videos have we seen? How many firsthand witness accounts from senators and mayors and lawyers and doctors and prosecutors that are Black, Indigenous, and people of color tell you outright, They don't know who in the hell I am, and they just stop me, and they're interrogating me, they're lying, they're using excessive force, they're blah, 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 blah. So at the end of the day, those of you who don't think this is about you and you've escaped racism and you've accomplished the American dream and you're accepted into white society and your white community and your white clubs and organizations and professional boards and all of that kind of stuff, and they're your buddies and pals and peers. No, they're really not. They're not. And let me tell you why. They just need some tokens, and they need to be able to say, the ones that say they're not racist and they're not, they don't discriminate. They need to make their consciences feel better. And in order to make their conscience feel better, they need to feel like they treat you fairly and equally. It's just that they will only go so far. So, yeah, your video didn't pause. I did. They will only go so far. They could be, your son and their son could be friends. Let me give you a scenario. And your son and their son get into something together. It becomes a crime. The white boy ends up killing somebody, and he went to go pick up his black friend to go and, get some weed from the ghetto or something. I don't know. Get some, cocaine from uptown. Whatever. Whatever they were doing, he had his black friend with him who'd grown up, and they've been, their parents have been friends professionally, and they play together, and, you're just in the club, you're accepted until something happens. And then now it's divide and conquer. They get arrested, and from the time the interaction happens with officers and they see your black boy and your friend's white son, I can guarantee you 100%, and so can every black, indigenous person of color guarantee, just like when we saw George Floyd's tragic snuffing out and sick taking of his life, you can see it with your eyes and you know what's about to happen. And despite the fact that they say it's not happening, you know that it's happening. And so we know what will happen when your black son and his white friend goes to jail. They get booked. The treatment is going to be different. The accommodations are going to be different. The courtesies are going to be different. The amount of phone calls given are going to be different. The tone in which they are talked to are going to be different. And guiltiness is going to be assumed on the person of color immediately, your black son, versus his white friend. No matter if the white friend says, I'm the one who did it and I shot this person, I robbed this person, I did this or that. No matter if that is the situation, you will have, or you may have, a corrupt police officer who is racist. You may have a corrupt defense lawyer who's hired by the white family. You may have a corrupt judge who is doing the bail hearing and the preliminary hearings. You may have a corrupt prosecutor who is friends with the mother of the father of the white boy, or they went to the same Catholic school or church, they went to the same law school, whatever. They live in the same town, county, whatever. You better believe by the time that story comes out and is done, the black boy did it and the white boy got off. He was used for state witness, so he would get the reduced time, the reduced sentence, and he would get a slap on the wrist. He would be released after he was questioned, and they would have fabricated a whole new goddamn story with evidence and witnesses and everything that go along with it, while your little black boy and his white friend, who was your white friend's child, that story would change your life forever, because you would realize that you're not one of them in a very instance like that. And that no, we are not being racist or discriminatory. We are looking out for self. And it is not a crime, and it should be. Your basic human right is safety and security and freedom. And if you don't have safety and security, and it waxes and wanes every other day of the week or month or year, depending on who's the president, depending on who's the sheriff in town, depending on, whatever is going on in the world, at that time. It shouldn't. It should not be questionable. It should not be up for grabs. It should not be an option. We should not have to still be talking about the same shit that our parents, grandparents, and great grandparents were talking about, because something has to be wrong. And so, for once and for all, um, I'm going to be a vessel, allow my mouth and these platforms to be a vessel, so that the stories that I will share with you of other families, um, and all of their horror stories of what has happened to them, what continues to happen to them, and how it happened to them, and how we start to expose and come together and join ourselves and join our stories. That at this point in time, because we can't depend on them to right the wrong and fix it, it's time for us to come up with the resolution to the problems ourselves, instead of waiting on them to do it for us, because it'll never happen. So I want to end the introduction um, on that, and I will talk to you next time. In the meanwhile, stay safe, stay black, and stay proud.